This is one of my best friends in the whole world, Paul Billings. Paul, as he shared, has been serving in Jordan. We served at the Bible College in Hungary and got to know him there. And our stories were very similar. High school, get saved in high school, go out on the mission field right after high school. And so we had so much in common, really connected. And we've just been, Joy and I and him and his wife Mel, we just stayed very, very close friends. And when I knew he was going to be here, I was like, please, please, please come and speak and share to our church. So would you guys welcome Paul Billings to share with us?
All right. Well, yeah, it's an honor and privilege to be here, and really excited to be at Phil's church, so I can tell a bunch of stories about him, and so you guys can find out who he really is. No. Actually, it's kind of interesting because when Phil, said, hey, you're going to be here, why don't you come down and share and whatnot, I was talking with my wife, Melanie, kind of about, well, what should we, what would be good to share? And I had something on my heart, but it was kind of like, I don't know. I guess it was something, at least in my mind, that I thought, wait, this maybe isn't really a good topic to share if you're coming as a guest, or it's like the new year, so a lot of times there's expectations to have what do we call those, New Year's resolutions or things like that. But it was interesting because I was just talking with Joy right before we started, and what I want to talk about is special needs and people and families with disabilities, and come to find out that you guys are actually kind of doing a big kind of push for that, which is super, super cool, and I'm super blessed to hear that. So I want to share from John chapter 9, just a few verses this morning. And as we consider this story, about this man who was born blind, I also want to share a little bit of our story, my wife and I and our 5 children. And I think that as we kind of go through this and we consider some of the things that are mentioned in this story, and as we share a little bit of what we've learned over the years, I hope that it's going to be encouraging for you guys. I hope it's going to be challenging for you, and kind of the end goal is that we understand how this kind of challenge that we have in our world is a way that God actually displays Himself in a more full way amongst us as a church, a community of believers, but also to the outside world. So let's look here in John chapter 9. We're going to start reading in the first verse here. And it says, as he, Jesus, passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So, as I read those words, there's a lot of things that really resonate in my heart. But the thing that I think about when, the disciples are talking about this man that was born blind, I think about the man and I think about his parents. And I think, here's someone who was born blind, and there's a lot that comes with those words. I mean, I think about the emotional kind of toll that something like that takes on, a lifelong, disability for that man and for his parents who had cared for him. It's not so much that way now in this culture in the United States and much of the Western world, but in many cultures, and as it was in that time, in Jesus' day, sickness brought a certain amount of shame upon people, upon the individual, and also upon the family. As in that time, society would have assumed, as we understand from, what the disciples say, they would have assumed that either this man, or his parents had committed some kind of sin, maybe some kind of secret sin or maybe something in the past, and that was the reason, okay, that this man was born blind, okay? This was maybe the result of God's judgment upon some kind of sin that they had committed. You know, you can imagine, even as we kind of understand that, you can imagine the rumors, right, that have been like floating around about this guy, about the parents, you know. Maybe when the child was born, right? The child is born and it was discovered that he's blind, right? Think of the stories that started getting passed around by people about this family, about the parents, about maybe the mother, right? Oh, I wonder that's so terrible. This child is born blind. I wonder what the parents did. I wonder why God did this to them. You know, all these kinds of stories and rumors that were floating around. You know, and you think about the emotional pain, right, that brings to obviously the parents, but then even as the child, as he grows and he gets older. I wonder then if the parents ever struggled with guilt, right? Maybe they felt like they had done something wrong. Maybe they did. Maybe they saw themselves as the reason that their own child was born blind. And you can imagine, right? You can imagine the weight of that kind of guilt and how much it would just crush you day after day, month after month, year after year. I think about the man as he got older, right? We learn from the story later on that the way that he provided for himself was what? That he begged. That's what happened in those days. That was the way that they survived. And society was set up in such a way that people were, you know, that it was expected that they would give, you know, to beggars. But I don't know, probably very few of us have ever experienced, right, the humiliation of having to beg, right, just to survive. Just to get the food that you need to live. You know, many of the places that I've lived in the world have been extremely, the economic situation has been very bad. So we have a lot of experience with these kinds of things, beggars. And I know personally many people that's how they survived for a certain amount of time in their life, and just how humiliating that is. How humiliating it is. No doubt this man was shunned, right, in society. He probably wasn't invited to the New Year's Eve party. You know what I mean? Like, people thought there's always some kind of stigma attached to this man and why he was born blind. You know, and as I was mentioning earlier on, that, you know, in our Western culture, I would say that overall, there's not so much of that stigma, right, anymore that's attached to maybe special needs or people or families of people that have disabilities. But the reality is, in the many places in the world, it's very much that way still to this day. There's many, many cultures, there's many places where there is still a very, I would call it dark and evil stigma that is attached, you know, to anybody that has any kind of, and even many religions of the world, they teach those things. They teach that if people have some kind of disability or special need or anything, that actually is God's judgment upon his just judgment. And they will just say, if God has willed it, you know, and that's the way it is. It's crazy. But so, you know, I just want us to kind of understand how this man and how his parents had been feeling and how they are feeling at this point when Jesus comes and his disciples ask. I mean, even that, imagine that, right? This guy could hear, I'm sure, and disciples say, hey, here's this guy born blind. Hey, Jesus, like, who sinned, this man or his parents? How many times had he heard that? How many times has his parents heard that, right? And just the emotional toll that has taken on him. But I want you to notice Jesus' answer. It's a very short answer, but it's pretty radical. It's pretty radical, and we can learn a lot from how he answers his disciples. In verse 3, Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." This very short answer, oh my gosh, it carries huge, enormous implications for you and I. I can imagine that the disciples were a little bit perplexed at Jesus' answer. Like the way they answered, the way they asked the question, they were already expecting an answer, right? They expected one of two answers. They're like, who sinned? Was it him or was it his parents? Right? So they were expecting Jesus to say, well, it was the parents, or, oh, it was him. But he doesn't say that. He says something completely unexpected. Completely unexpected. Man, I think so many times that's part of our problem, is that we already have an expectation of knowing the situation, right? Man, so often I see that. I experience that with people so often. It's kind of crazy, when someone has a problem or an issue, it's like someone comes and you're talking to them, and they like know the answer, It's funny how we know the answer for everyone else's problems, but we can't figure out our own problems, So interesting. But I think, that we can be like the disciples sometimes. And you know what? That's one of the worst things. That's one of the worst things we can do. I'll share a little bit later our story, but our second son, Timothy, he has autism, and he also has epilepsy. And one of the things that it's become a natural kind of or not natural, but normal occurrence in our life, is that people kind of assume that they know how to figure out his issues, A lot of times, people have all kinds of, treatment or treatment or things that you can do that will kind of help or solve all of his problems, And I'm not against, us helping each other and trying to figure things out, but, sometimes that's the worst thing we can do, is when we tell somebody hey, you should do this, or you haven't tried that or whatnot, and it's kind of assuming that you know the situation when really you don't, So often people and families, they need community, we're going to talk about that. They need people that just are going to be a part of their lives, that are just going to walk down this road with them. Because the truth is there's very often there aren't answers. There's no easy answers. The reality sometimes is that this is just the road that we have to walk, And that's where I believe, and we're going to talk about this, but God has called us as a church to walk that road together. And that's actually what I believe displays who God is to each other, to us, and to the world. I do want to mention that sometimes, okay, so if you were to, let's start with this. If we are to look at the Bible, what Jesus is saying is that some of the challenging things in our world, the sicknesses, the illnesses, they're not necessarily a direct result of an individual decision, right? That's what the disciples were saying, right? They were saying that it was either the parents or this guy, and that's why he was born blind. But what Jesus is saying is no, that's not always the case, all right? But if we take a step back, we do have to say that all sickness, right, and all illness and all of the things that are not right about our world are the result of sin. Right? They are the result of sin. And that it's a result that God never intended. Those are things that God never intended us to experience. But that's That's the boat we're in because of sin. Okay, so I do want us to understand that. So there are things in our lives that we maybe suffer from, or, let's say special needs and disabilities, that they're not necessarily a direct result of an individual sin. Okay? So we got that, right? But there are times where they are a direct result of an individual choice or decision. So our son, he's adopted. And when our oldest son was, Melanie's not here to tell me, he was 6 months old, we were living in Kyrgyzstan at the time, and she took our oldest son to the clinic for a checkup or vaccinations or whatever, I don't remember. But while she was there, she called me and she said, "Hey, Paul, you got to come back right away." And what happened was she met a young girl there who was pregnant, and she had come into the clinic to get an abortion. And she was like 7 months pregnant, right? So the doctor's like, "You can't do this, it's too dangerous, it's not going to happen." And the story is kind of long, but because of the situation this girl was in, if she were to have this baby, it could be like her relatives would probably kill her. She had been hiding this pregnancy for 7 months. She used to wrap herself, tightly, and she was starving herself so that her relatives wouldn't know that she was pregnant. And so she came, we said, "Hey, you don't have to do this. We'll take the child, and whatnot." So long story short, she came and she lived with us until she had the baby. And during the last kind of like month, I guess it was, of her pregnancy, it was kind of expected, but there was a lot of complications, right? The doctors started to realize that there was, that the baby wasn't getting all the oxygen that he needed, and some of the decisions that this girl had made had affected that. That's just the reality. And so sometimes the decisions we make, they do have direct consequences, okay? But what I want to say to you, and the reason I say that is because that's the reality, right? Sometimes the situations we're in, and even sometimes the disabilities and the special needs, they are a direct result, okay, of our choices. I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that, but that's just the reality of life. But what is so amazing about our God is that he can take those things and he redeems it. He redeems it. Right? And so we don't have to live with that crushing guilt. We don't have to live with shame that pushes us down, because God can take that very situation and he can redeem it, and he can use it to show himself, to show his glory, to display his works. So I want to be very clear on that point. God redeems those things. God can redeem anything. It's amazing. But the other thing I want to consider, all right, here in this story, is what exactly Jesus meant, okay, when he said that, this man being born blind was so that God's work could be displayed. I've thought a lot about that, okay? And I don't have a conclusive answer. You can ask Phil later, afterwards. He knows. But this is what I've come to. I do not think that Jesus was only referring to when he was going to heal the blind man later on. I think it's part of that. But I find it hard to believe that this man was born blind, and that his whole life, we know from the story that he was an adult man at this point. So, I don't know, 20, 30 years, okay, a long time. Maybe even he was older than that. But all of those years, were they meaningless? Did he live his whole life for that one moment when Jesus would show his works through him? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. I believe that the whole life of this man up until this point, that it was an opportunity for God's works to be displayed. And the reason I say that, and I know we're not supposed to interpret the Bible through our experience, okay? But our experience has an important part in us understanding, I think, the word. But the reason I say that is because of our experience, okay, with our son. And it's caused me to really think about this and even, search, a lot of the scriptures. And so I don't think the scriptures agree with that thought, that it was that one moment. I think that the whole life of this man was an opportunity for God's works to be put on display. What does that mean? What does that mean that God's works are put on display? I think that what that is referring to is what we often say as God glorifying himself or God being glorified. What does that mean? Well, it's basically just something where God is expressed. God's glory is his fame. It's who he is. It's what's expressed about him. And so often that happens through us. It happens through creation, but so often it happens through us, his image bearers. God is expressed. Something about God is made known through our lives. I love that in the scriptures, as we think about, people and families, of people with disabilities and special needs, that God's heart he's always had a special place in his heart for those families and those people. If we look in Leviticus, God clearly commands his people in the Old Testament. He says, "You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord." So God is saying, hey, don't curse them. Don't put them down. Don't think less of them. Don't think that they are a weight on society that maybe would be better if it wasn't there. He says, no, fear me. I'm the one. I'm the one who takes care of them. In Psalm 82, verse 3, we read, "Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked." That's you and me. That's us, right? We're supposed to be taking up the cause of the weak and the disenfranchised, those people that society pushes aside, that society thinks maybe less of them, that maybe they're not a full person. No. God is telling us his heart that we're supposed to rescue those people. We're supposed to care for them. We're supposed to deliver them. And here is a point, probably one of the main points I want you to catch about this is often when we think about the church and we think about our community, we think about what we can do, right, for families and people, families with disabilities and special needs as a church. And that's awesome. I mean, I'm so excited to hear about what you guys are doing and the direction you're headed because unfortunately, even in our day and age, there's many churches that they are not prepared. They haven't even thought out how are they going to minister to somebody, to a family that comes and they have a child with special needs or disabilities. How are they going to go, and enjoy children's ministry with all the other kids, right? A lot of times what churches do is they just have kind of a room in the back and they say, well, we don't want you to disturb us, so go back in the room and you can listen, from back there or whatnot. But a lot of churches also, some churches, they've come a long way. And I've seen churches, and it sounds like you guys are doing a great job trying to be ready and prepared for that, okay? And teaching the church about how to receive these people. We're planning a church in our context, and we're in a culture where it's still very, very, people have no idea what to do. Like when you go out into society, you never see anybody with special needs. And you hardly ever see anybody with any kind of physical disability because people keep them, hid them away. They're ashamed. because of how society views them. So what we had to do is we had to just start by like training people about special needs and about disabilities. And I'm not talking about necessarily about like professional training, just like, hey, you're a believer and God's called you to love everybody. So when someone comes like, you don't look at them strange, or you don't ask about, hey, who sinned, you or your parents? You just go up and you say, hi, what's your name? Like, my name's whatever, Paul, and I'm so glad that you're here, and that's so cool that you came, and hey, there's this over here. It seems so simple. And, I'm talking about my context, but as we started doing that as a church, and as we started having special opportunities and planned events and whatnot for these families, it's amazing. It's amazing how that actually expresses who God is, right? It expresses who God is. But what I want to do is I want to flip it. I want to flip that around, right? So how we as a church can bless, right, families with kids who have special needs, or individuals and their families. But I want to suggest something to you this morning that has been a recent revelation for me, or realization over the last few years, that actually these kinds of people, they are the ones that allow us, they actually give us the opportunity to display something about God that we couldn't have displayed before without them. They are a huge asset for us. They are an opportunity for us to understand more about God, and for those around us to understand something more about God. So it's not so much, it's kind of a two-way street, okay? It's about how we can minister, but it's also recognizing that we need them. We need them. There's a lot here. And the reason I say that is we've seen that with our son. He has incredible challenges, and he faces daily challenges that I have no idea. It's extremely difficult for him to communicate, right? He's partial verbal, right? And then the seizures that he has sometimes obviously take a lot of toll. But what I've seen, and I've seen it a lot in my own life, but I've seen it more in the lives of my kids, So our son who has autism, Timothy, he's 15 years old, and then his older brother is 15, is a few months older. And then we have a 13-year-old, and then we have twins who, they're 11. But, what I've noticed over the years, the amount of love and compassion and empathy that my kids show to others because of Timothy being in our family is amazing. It wouldn't have been, I'm convinced that it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there in their lives. And so Timothy, with all of his challenges and the difficulties, and yeah, it's hard. I don't want to paint a rosy picture about it. It's hard, man. It's hard sometimes for us. And he brings a lot of trouble into our family, okay? But what he brings to our family on the positive side it's amazing. It's amazing. My youngest son, we were, this last summer, we come usually to the United States every 2 years. And one of the reasons we do that is because he was born with a heart condition, and he had open heart surgery when he was 3 months old. So he has to have these periodic checkups. So we were at the hospital, me and him, and we were on our way out from the appointment, and he noticed that there was like some commotion going on down the hall, and there was a mom and her daughter, I believe, and like the daughter was screaming and like kind of going crazy, and like she was having a meltdown, and the people were around her. It was interesting. Like some people were like didn't know what to do, right? Some people were like kind of looking at the mom like, why can't you control, right, your daughter? And then But my son, he looks at me, he's like, oh my gosh, Dad, like she needs help. Like we need to go help her. Like he totally understood what was going on. Like it's amazing. Like all of our kids, when we go anywhere, like they're the first ones to recognize like anybody who has special needs or anyone with a disability. And they right away, there's so much empathy and compassion. It's amazing. And that's what we need. That's what we need. I need to be more compassionate. You know, I need to be more loving. Have any of you ever prayed, God, make me more loving, make me more compassionate? Anybody? A couple of you. Well, that's good. Great. Phil's got some work to do. Man. Come on, let's go. No, I mean, I would say that's like a daily prayer for me. But how does that happen? How does that happen? I don't think it's just by sitting in the morning in our chair drinking coffee, like reading the Bible. That's a part of understanding, but I think it happens in the daily life with people, you know. And so as you guys invite families and individuals, special needs and disabilities, you know what's going to happen? You guys are going to be some of the most compassionate people in this world. You're going to be the most loving. And that's what the world needs. That's what the world needs. You know, the church, man, I just don't know where it came from. But like some people think the church is supposed to be this community or people like these, like, I don't even know the right words, but these ideal like people, you know, perfect. Like if you're a Christian, or right, you're the Christian family, it's this family that don't have any problems, everybody's happy, and like, what the heck, where did that come from? Like that is not a biblical picture. Like we're gonna have a lot of sorrow and a lot of suffering, you know? And so the church is supposed to be a place where we suffer, where we have people that are going through all kinds of issues, right? And I think that is a way, as obviously as we walk through those things as God would want us, God displays his work. God is glorified in that. I don't think that God is glorified in the perfect family with no problems who are just putting on a face. I think God is glorified in a church that has all kinds of people with all kinds of issues, but we're committed to Jesus. We're committed to following Jesus together. And he is transforming us as we walk through all of that stuff. And I think that's the hope, you know. That's the hope of this passage, right? Is so Jesus eventually heals this blind man, right? But I don't know about you, or maybe people that you know, or those we've prayed that God would heal our son Timothy. Of course, we pray for that. But at the same time, we recognize that maybe he isn't going to be healed until when? Until the new earth, right? Until Jesus' kingdom is established. And I think that's what we see in this story. Jesus came and, right, he was always preaching the kingdom, and he said the kingdom has come near. He inaugurated the kingdom. He gave us a picture. And that's the hope that we long for. You know, I'm so excited that one day I'm going to be able to talk to my son Timothy, and he's going to understand me. I'm going to understand him. And we're going to be in the new earth in God's kingdom together. That's the hope, you know, that we're moving towards. And that's the hope for you and I. As we're in this messed up, fallen world with things that are hard to understand, right? Special needs and disabilities and mental illness and depression. Man, you know what? I don't have the answers for all those things. And you don't either often. But what are we doing as a community of believers? We're loving each other. We're helping each other walk through those things, and we're encouraging each other towards that hope, right? Where we're headed. This is the situation we're in. God is glorified. He's displaying his works in the midst of all of this. But there is hope, right? This isn't it. This isn't the end, you know? And that's the hope. That's the hope that we have. So this is my final thought. Let's not see like our weaknesses or maybe, special needs or disabilities as hindrances in our lives, okay? But let's see them as opportunities for God's glory to be put on display. Or as my wife likes to say, she was reading something, sharing with me, that, these are occasions for God's grace to be made known to those around us. So, yeah, I think we have some songs. I don't know if we have any songs.
There was a, thank you. That's the best way we could start 2022. Stay here. Wait, stay here for a second. I want to tell, while he's getting set up, we always have this fun story about, used to call him Tilek, but he goes by Timothy now.
Sorry. Yeah. There's a lot about this story, but I want to just say this because I like taking up a lot of time. And sure. So when Timothy is still not born, the hospital knew that this mother was going to give him up and we were going to adopt him. And just because of culture and all this kind of stuff, everybody in the ward called him the unwanted child. That's like there's a word in Russian that, it says that. And so our son's name is Timothy Tilek Billings, okay? And that the middle name Tilek, it means wanted or desired in Kyrgyz. And so that's why we had that. We specifically, chose that. And that's what God, even for you, right? You are wanted. Maybe the world doesn't want you. I don't know, maybe. But God, He wants us, And there's lots of challenges. There's lots of dark times. I'm going to kid. But, like several years ago when we first found out that Timothy had epilepsy and he started having seizures and we went down with all the medication and stuff, we tried this new medication for him and he went crazy. He would get knives and try to stab my wife and all these things. And I remember I called Phil because if you know Timothy, he's like one of the sweetest kids. Even he's not aggressive really ever. And so if you're listening or you're out there, I know there's dark times. The thing that my wife and I struggle with the most is hopelessness, because there's no easy way forward, treatment and all these kinds of things. So that's what I'm encouraging you guys to be is, right? Just that community, right? For each other. We don't have to have the answers, but we do need hope, and we can offer that to each other. So anyways.
Let's pray for him. Lord, thank you so much for your word today. So good. We needed it so much. Great way to start our year. Lord, I want to pray for Timothy. I know it's been a rough go the last several years, and medication and then just getting, going through teenage years. That's hard. And I'm thankful for how you're using his life. I pray that, Lord, where he's at, and I'm glad he's in a good place. I pray that you just continue to sustain him in a good place, Lord, and keep using his life, Lord. Keep using his life. I pray for Paul and Mel that you would as well just, Lord, we want to just get a little tiny, sliver of the kind of empathy that his family has been given through Timothy's life. Help us to become more empathetic and thoughtful to the people around us for the sake of the kingdom of God and for the glory of our God and for the sake of the gospel, Lord. I just pray for the Billings that you would bless them. Lord, not that fake kind of make everything happy. That's not it, Lord. But make their life so rich with your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for joining us, whether online or in person. We pray that the ministry of Calvary San Diego is encouraging you in your faith. If you would like to follow along with what we are doing or hear more teachings, you can do so by downloading the Calvary SD mobile or TV app. Also, if you would like to partner with us and worship through giving, you can do so at calvarysd.com/give. Thanks for tuning in.